Phoenix Suns made another move in free agency as they have brought back guard and wing Damion Lee on their player option deal. Now, Damion Lee did decline that player option, but he is now back with this Suns team and is one of the last roster spots filled. Will Matt Ishbia dive in, look at more roster building, or will this be the main team that the Suns run with? We'll be diving into all of that and more on this episode of Suns Digest. I'm Bruce Veliz. You guys have been absolutely fantastic hitting that like button, showing us that support on the channel. You guys don't know, 79% of you guys who watch our videos are not subscribed. So if you want to make sure you stay up to date on everything revolving around this Suns team ASAP, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Without further ado, though, let's dive into the topic at hand. Make sure to grab a snack. And like I mentioned, Damion Lee is back with this Suns team. He will be returning after he missed last season due to an injury. We want to look at this report we can see from Adrian Wojnarowski that free agent guard Damion Lee is returning to the Phoenix Suns on a one-year deal, sources tell ESPN. Now, this was a little bit confusing with Damion Lee, as we saw he had a player option with this Phoenix Suns team. If we want to look here, he's had a player option, could have accepted that player option, could have declined it. He went out and declined that player option and ended up coming back on the Phoenix Suns for a little bit more of a bump, as we see from Gerald Bourguet. As we had mentioned before, Lee opting out to re-sign for slightly more than the vet minimum seemed to be the plan. He loves Phoenix and in his last healthy season was third in three-point percentage. Suns definitely will need shooters under Mike Budenholzer, and that's what he ultimately can bring for this Suns lineup as they look to make a push in the Western Conference. We've kind of broken this down, talking about it, how the Phoenix Suns need ultimately some good shooters and good offensive players alongside the likes of Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker to help out in this offensive rhythm and flow when their players are hurt or, struggling from three-point range. As we've seen, Beal and Kevin Durant are getting older. They are going to run into some injuries. And even Devin Booker in the last couple of seasons has run into some injuries of his own. Therefore, I do expect this Suns team to not play, all 82 games as a big three. So having some of these wing players and, backup role players to kind of spot in and fill those roles is key, especially in an offense where Mike Budenholzer is going to want it to be a primarily shooting offense and focused on that three-pointer. You want to have guys that can trust and you can put into those solutions, either regardless if it's for 5 to 10 minutes or maybe even 15 to 20 minutes in some aspects of a game to kind of hold over and replace that shooting when you lose out one of those big three stars. And as we've kind of broken down and as we've kind of, mentioned with this Phoenix Suns team throughout the whole entire time, their roster is basically filling up. We already know they're a second apron team, so the only way they can make additions is through the veteran minimum market, and we've seen them make a couple of those. We saw them yesterday sign Monte Morris, another guard, combo guard who can play pretty solid, has a nice assist to turnover ratio, and should help out in closing some games and setting up the offense for the Phoenix Suns. We also saw them go out and get Mason Plumlee to replace Drew Eubanks, who I still think can be a better rim protector and solid entire interior paint presence for the offensive and defensive side for the Suns, which they lacked last season when they took out Yusuf Nurkic out of the floor. And also, they bring back a guy in Josh Okogie, in Damion Lee. That gets to our next part, which kind of talks about the one player who has not come back, which is Josh Okogie. Sorry, I kind of mispronounced the names right there. But yes, Josh Okogie, the one player who has not accepted his player option, has not reworked his player option, has not noticeably done anything with this Phoenix Suns team. Could that mean he's looking out on the market to get a bigger role to be playing for a different team? Possibly. Could that mean that he wants to come back to this Suns team and be that, 3-and-D wing-esque type guy for this Suns squad? We'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, like we mentioned, the Suns have one open roster spot, and they most likely would like to bring back a guy in Josh Okogie who can be that solid defender, maybe work a little bit on his jump shot and kind of stretch out the floor for the Phoenix Suns. But as we've seen with them also, they were also linked to a guy in Reggie Bullock, who I think would maybe be a little bit of an upgrade than Josh Okogie, a little bit more veteran experience across the NBA, even though he didn't really play much for the Rockets last year in that sign and trade when he was sent over there. I ultimately think that a guy like Reggie Bullock could be a depth piece or even a guy who comes in and plays 5 to 8 minutes if the Suns need him with injuries or something like that, and he can still be a solid wing defender, but also hit and stretch that shot a little bit similar to a guy like Eric Gordon, who the Suns did lose in free agency to the Phoenix Suns. But that kind of gets us into the next point here, kind of discussing what this means for the Phoenix Suns team and kind of what this roster has to be looking towards doing or wanting to be doing for the rest of free agency. Because as we mentioned, this team is looking pretty stacked. If we want to look at this roster here, you can see the 14 guys are already filled. Ryan Dunn's name is not listed there, but he signed his rookie year deal today as well, $2.1 million. He is locked up with this Suns team. Then you look at the bottom, we obviously saw them make some two-way additions as well. They picked up Jalen Bridges, and they also signed a guy in Colin Gillespie. Now, I would like to mention that I do believe that a guy in Oso Ighodaro will be taking that last two-way spot for this Suns squad. So I do not think any of their other guys from Tyrese Samuel or any other guys that they looked at to bring in for Exhibit 10 days are going to work up to that level. They might be Exhibit 10 days kind of working out in the summer league, trying to find a home, or possibly maybe even find a role on this Suns G League team due to the fact if they retain all their players from their draft or some of those players go overseas. We'll have to wait and see what that roster looks like as well. But this Suns roster is looking like it's going to be compiled of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Grayson Allen, and Yusuf Nurkic. And looking at the bench, your most likely bench five is going to be Royce O'Neal, Monte Morris, add a guy in Damion Lee, add a guy in Mason Plumlee, and add a guy in Ryan Dunn. That's your 10 right there. And then your bench five after that would be looking at the possible likes of David Roddy, Bol, um, trying to look through this list here, trying to see if there's anybody that I'm missing off the top of my head. Nazir Little, um, and whoever else you do address to sign in free agency. Ultimately, and Damion Lee, excuse me. Ultimately, that Suns team does look like it can compete, does look like it can make some noise in this Western Conference, and they still have tradable contracts and still have some assets at the trade deadline. As we've mentioned, this Suns team with extending guys like Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen does not make them tradable. But if the Suns do want to trade up Grayson Allen shooting at the deadline to a team that desperately needs shooting to find a role, maybe a better rebounder or a wing stopper, they have that flexible contract to do so. If the Suns also want to look at guys like, I don't know, Nazir Little or David Roddy and possibly attach that 2031 first round pick to that contract to possibly upgrade at a certain position as well, I do not count that out at the question mark either. Nazir Little kind of was brought into the system to be that underappreciated wing, kind of get worked on and developed here in Phoenix with the lack of wings. But now with Royce O'Neal, now with Grayson Allen, now with obviously Ryan Dunn, and now the signing of Damion Lee, possibly the reuniting with Josh Okogie. I don't necessarily know if Nazir Little is going to have a role or predominant role on this Suns team. If he's making $7 million and just riding the bench and not playing, there's no reason to have him on this team. Try to find a young team that has salary cap that will take on his contract. And even if you have to use that 2031 first round pick to dump that contract to either free some flexible salary space to either pick up a free agent and or use that $7 million to trade for a player that can be helpful for you and you can still salary dump his contract, I still think that is a smart move for the Phoenix Suns. And I would not rule the Phoenix Suns being done with all of their moves just because their roster spots are almost seemingly filling up. I do think that there's a possibility that a trade could arise revolving around either Nazir Little or David Roddy, regardless of this team, as we've seen this roster kind of build and come to formation. Now, I do think that the center and everybody else is locked up. I don't see we'll see a Yusuf Nurkic move, maybe towards the trade deadline, depending on how this Suns roster team is looking or how Yusuf Nurkic is looking. But at this very point, I do not see a Yusuf Nurkic trade. The only player I could see being traded is possibly a Nazir Little contract due to the fact that he's making $7 million and it's looking like he's not seemingly going to have an impactful role or even a role to play on this Suns team with the additions that they've made throughout the entire offseason. Well, let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. How do you guys feel about this Damion Lee signing, and how would you guys feel about the possibility of looking at a Nazir Little trade to maybe even spice up and add some things to this roster? Once again, I'm Bruce Veliz. Thank you guys so much for showing your support over here on Suns Digest. We recently hit our goal of 1,000 subscribers. CJ and I are absolutely ecstatic due to the fact that you guys have shown that support, and we can't thank you guys enough. We're going to have more videos coming out, so if you want to make sure you stay updated on everything revolving around the Suns, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and the live streams will be coming throughout the off season as well. We're going to figure out a weekly day. We'll get that noticed up to you, get a time pamped out for you guys, and you guys will have a weekly stream as well. Once again, I'm Bruce Velez. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Suns Digest, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your day, and go Phoenix Suns!